Good morning, everybody. I'll try to go short on these. I wasn't going to do no more. I got work to do. Let me talk real quick about why I'm upset about the unsolvability of the robbery of my son-in-law. Last week, my daughter told me, "Oh, Dad, did you see on Facebook? Anthony, who was robbed, found the house where the person lived who more than likely did the robbery. He found it. And on Facebook, he was parked in front of the house where the young kid or son of the people that lived there, was carrying out robberies throughout that neighborhood where my son-in-law was robbed." So my daughter thought the cops were going to be there, because how did he find it? Okay, this is what your Ccpd does. I wasn't going to even discuss this anymore. And I was praying. And I don't watch a lot of old movies, but I have some here. And I'm thinking of the movie Gladiator. And I'll meet you in Elysium. And that was a statement where they're going into a battle. And that thing was like, I forget what that meant, but it came to my mind. And then on the Christian radio that I had on, sure enough, that some preacher comes on and quotes from the movie. I've never heard a quote from the movie Gladiator. I have that Christian station on in the morning when I'm praying and worshiping before I do my other prayers. And I said, that's strange. But the idea was, you never fear to speak out. Okay, so my son-in-law went on Facebook and online to the local area, and they actually have, I believe it's King's Crossing subdivision, but my son-in-law was robbed on a street called Cross Ridge, if I remember. So on that Crime Stoppers, or the Neighborhood Crime Watch, they had video and stuff of that particular person who was committing robberies in that neighborhood. Now, I don't want to share too much, but my son-in-law lives, he talked to a friend of his who's an officer and said, this would happen out there. And the cop said, yes, we know that kid is committing a lot of robberies, because he knew. So my daughter thought for sure that day when my son-in-law was at the house, he parked right in front of the house where that kid had stole his stuff, because that kid was stealing, and that's how my son-in-law figured it out. He did the solvability. Then they thought, okay, they'll just they know more than likely he was the one who took it because he was committing robberies. But the cops never showed up that day. My daughter told me later, she said, no, Anthony was there by himself because, like I explained, they found it, they seen it. The citizens basically are getting the videos of the robberies that have taken place and all. They have to do it themselves. So they thought, surely now we got it, because the cop friend of my son-in-law said, yes, he's been doing this kid, and it's a problem in the neighborhood. Then they got the letter that I read yesterday, which said it's unsolvable. That's why you could have the address of the perpetrator, you could have videos from the Neighborhood Crime Watch, you could have everything, and they would consider it unsolvable. Why did you have more ICE? The raids that were recently done that I commented yesterday, why did you have more arrests in Corpus Christi, Texas, than in any other city throughout the nation? Those were the ICE raids done over a period of maybe a month. And through the whole nation, there was 1,300 and something arrests. And out of that, over 10% were in the city of Corpus Christi. How could that be? That's just not a crime problem. That's a corruption problem. The media reported that ICE worked in cooperation with the local authorities and cops, but I'm sure that they realized that there's a level of corruption and that they couldn't tip off the local police because they would have informed. That has to be it. There's no other, because the city of Corpus Christi's got about 320,000 population. Houston's got 7 times that. And in Houston you only had 40 busts, and in Corpus Christi 165. And the crime problem in Houston, because of the population, is more. But yet, why did that happen? So, this is why that letter that said, we're not going to investigate this, even though they knew the house, the person, there's video of that particular person who's committing robberies in that subdivision called King's Crossing. You very rarely have that much evidence on anything. The house, the videos, very rarely. So what you see is a problem. I've had multiple friends. This is how you know that things more than likely are not just rumors. But all the years on the streets, I've had multiple friends tell me that on the streets in Corpus Christi, you have a drug problem. But they've told me that there's also the sale of what they refer to as cop dope. And that cop dope is basically the stuff that some within the Ccpd, when they, you have the drug lockers and places where you keep drugs. And there was a police chief in another city, Driscoll, last year. He was going into the drug locker. It's a very small town. I used to drive through it when I went to the fire department in Kingsville. But he got busted. He resigned. I don't know if his case made it to court, but he was accessing the drug locker, and it was a small department. But one of the... So supposedly the cop dope is the drugs that are confiscated by the local PD that wind up on the street, because they say they spray it with a certain scent. And I've heard this multiple times from multiple sources. Okay? Well, John, there's corruption, obviously, within departments throughout the country. Correct. I just watched a whole documentary. It's very interesting, on the 7-5 precinct in New York. And it was a very corrupt cop. As I watched it, I forget his name now. He seemed like a nice guy. Seemed like somebody I would work with, in the sense of like some of my friends, meaning on the street type guy. But it was interesting because he was involved collecting $8,000 a week from local drug dealers in New York City, I guess back in the 70s. And eventually he got busted. And they had on the documentary that he was before like a panel, sort of hearings in New York City at the time, because they were trying to investigate corruption within the police department of New York City. And they asked him, I guess he agreed that he did like 10 years maybe in prison. But they were asking him, they said, what does it mean to be a good cop? That reference in that precinct at that time. And he explained, he said, because they couldn't figure out, all the other cops in that department, in that precinct, they knew that he was, quote, a bad cop. Meaning they knew he was on the streets, he was very active in the underground. And even the good officers within his department, they didn't want to partner up with him, because they said no. And there was a younger cop that got on the department, he also knew, and the younger cop's wife said, no, don't partner with him. He couldn't get a partner because they knew that this one officer, and he described the corrupt cop that had to finally give the statements to the hearing. he basically said a good cop meant, in the vernacular of that precinct, it meant you don't report other cops who are criminal. And they wanted to show that. That's why they did those hearings. It was a documentary called The 7-5. I think it's on Netflix. 2-3 weeks ago I watched it. And Mike something was that officer's name. And he tried to explain that the police departments are like a family. And it's considered, you're considered a rat if you're another cop who actually reports an officer who is committing crimes. And he said that was the culture within the police department, that you might be aware of cop dope on the street, if that's correct, but your job as another officer is to, like good cop meant, you don't get involved in it possibly, but you don't report that. That's why when I spoke to that internal affairs cop from Ccpd 4 or 5 years ago, talking about the stupid dumping ticket, but I was upset. And when I told him, I said, you have cops in Flower Bluff that are in the underground that are involved in criminal activity. And you would think if a citizen makes a statement like that to an internal affairs officer, that he would immediately defend how he knew. He kind of asked if I had anything else. And what that showed me was here in South Texas, you have a corruption within the court system here. You have a corruption here. And I believe more than likely that the reason we had more arrests in this city than in any other city in the recent ICE raids across the country is because you have tip-offs, you have those that are involved. The ones I see on a regular basis, to me, I don't think it's the older guys that have been around for a while, and they allowed. And so you do have this problem in departments throughout the U.S. There are many cases in normal municipalities when it gets to a certain level, then you have federal authorities that come in. But we've had a lot of the guys on the street, the Fed vehicles, the federal authority vehicles, the guys, they all know which ones they're in, because over the many years they'll say, oh, there's a lot of feds out here today, like in this area. But they're not here they're normally here because they realize that the local departments have something going on. And they're kind of the police. The federal agents are like the police for the local police. So that's just why the unsolvability, rather. My son-in-law found the house. That's because that same kid that lived in that house, still there, he's been out, and the local civilian neighborhood crime watch has videos of that kid committing, in the vehicle he uses, committing robberies. So you have a lot. Normally you'd have cause to say, no, you have multiple robberies. So that's why it's strange that they have decided, this one we're not going to investigate. Openly saying in a letter. You see? So this is a short one, because I have work to do. You know, there are so many scriptures. The voice of the Lord cries unto the city. God's voice, through his people, through the church. And the man of wisdom shall see thy name. Hear ye the rod who hath appointed it. Last night on the post, I've just read through Isaiah, and I forget what chapter it was, but I always quote from that chapter in my prayer time. There's a lot. These are prophecies of the kingdom, of the power of God. I'm going to teach some on Zechariah coming up in the next week or so. Who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, and gave the nations before him. He shall come upon princes. This is God's kingdom manifesting in coming against the kingdoms of the world, the authorities that are corrupt. He shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and the coastland shall wait for his law. Who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, and gave the nations before him? If you read that particular chapter that I posted last night, the one in Zechariah that I'm going to teach on when I do the next chapter of Kings, it's the I think Zechariah 8, it's the prophecy of Jesus. We call it messianic prophecy. Your king comes lowly, riding upon a donkey, which is fulfilled in the Gospel of Matthew, but it's prophesied by Zechariah. So this is the coming of Christ, the Messiah. It says he is just. He metes out justice. There's compassion and mercy on the lowly, but there is this conflict with the kingdoms of the world, which we see play out in the Gospels, where the voice of John the Baptist, which I've been teaching about, speaking against corruption and authority, Herod at that time, and how a kingdom finally executed John. And Jesus referred to that same authority structure when they threatened him. Don't you know he has the power through manipulation to even execute you, Jesus? And he said, go tell that fox, today and tomorrow I'm going to do these miracles, and the third day I'll be perfected. Indeed, Herod, you will kill me, and I'll be back, is what he was saying. And today, and he was raised from the dead, and he came lowly, but he meted out justice. And he had compassion on those that were in sin, that were in society. But those that were in authority, that were in sin, there was justice brought to them. Okay? So this is the theme we see. So this is number one. I have work to do. Here's the little concrete thing. I don't know if I showed it. I forget how many. So that's the rebuilt altar. Okay? And there's a scripture already that I read, I think Zechariah, that'll go. Hear the voice of my supplications when I cry unto you, and I lift up my hands towards thy holy oracle. It's both the temple, but it's the word of God that dwells in us. Arise, O God, and enter into your rest, even into the ark of your strength. There's a lot of teaching I can do on that. I don't want to go too long.